Resources Committee. I've been told I've got to read this out. I hope this isn't, we haven't got to do this every meeting for the rest of civilization, but welcome to today's meeting of the Policy and Resources Committee. My name is Councillor Mark Bayliss and I'm the chair of the committee. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you've left the building, the assembly point is on the High Street opposite the Guildhall. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceeding. Reporting includes filming, photography, making an audio recording and providing commentary on the proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed and recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphones when speaking. Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to the agenda then. Item number 1, the appointment of substitutes. Are there any?
Chair, we have no substitutes tonight.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Do I see any? Okay, I have one to declare myself on the item number 11, Future High Streets Fund Funding Agreement. I don't consider it to be, it's certainly not pecuniary, although I will vacate the chair for that item, and I've asked Councillor Stephen to stand in for me for that item. Any other declarations of interest? There being none, we move on. Item number 3, public representations. Are there any?
Chair, no, we have no public speakers tonight.
Thank you very much. Item number 4, the minutes of our meeting of this committee on the 23rd of March to be approved and signed. Are they, let's check them for accuracy first. Are you happy and content with these? Yep. Councillor Gregson.
Thanks, Chair. I just wondered, there is a reference there to the Towns Fund. I wondered if it was worth making a comment on that tonight, under that minute.
I think the minute is correct. I think we might, are you saying, given today's announcement?
I'm on matters arising.
You're on matters arising, yeah. Okay. You're happy with the minute in that sense? Okay. We don't, okay, I'll put that to agree. Are we agreed on those minutes? I'll take it those are agreed. Okay, we don't tend to have matters arising, but would you like to comment on that, Councillor Gregson, 139?
No, I think we do have matters arising in committee. It's not we don't have council, but I don't want to be pedantic.
No. This is just minutes, item 4, but I'm happy to agree if you want to make a comment on it.
I don't want to make a comment. I thought maybe the officers might be prepared to make a comment since it's all over the press this morning.
Well, I'll invite the Managing Director if he wishes to.
Thank you. I can just confirm that today we received a draft heads of terms from MHCLG setting out an allocation of £19.6 million towards our town investment plan projects. We have now until the 29th of this month to agree, sign those heads of terms, and then from the date at which those terms are signed, we then have 2 months to follow up that signature, setting out to the department which projects we wish to take forward. Some members will know that our original town investment plan comprised some £28 million worth of projects. And so we have to do a piece of work now that will involve the town investment plan board in terms of agreeing how we wish to prioritise and allocate the £19.6 million. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We'll move on. Okay, if those are approved, we move on to the minutes of the Personnel and General Purposes Committee, Subcommittee on the 3rd of March. Are there any Are those correct? Are we happy to approve those and accept those? Agreed? We agree those. Okay, we receive those. Okay, item number 6, minutes of the Place and Economic Development Subcommittee held on the 8th of March. Are those a true and accurate record from those who were there? Councillor Denham.
Sorry, due respect, if I'm understanding correctly, the purpose of this committee is to receive those minutes in terms of accuracy. The minutes will have been agreed by the committees, the subcommittees themselves.
That is technically correct, yes, but we're receiving them only unless you have any other comments on them. I guess we'll move to that. Councillor Griffiths.
I think there's actually a mistake on these ones. I wasn't at the meeting,
Okay.
but it says apologies from Councillor Lucy Hodgson and Matt Lamb, but I believe Matt Lamb was actually there in place of Joyce Squires. There's a typo on the minutes.
Apologies, yes, he's shown as both present and an apology. Thank you for that. We'll correct that. Thank you very much. Are we happy to receive these? Great, thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 7, the minutes of the Income Generation Subcommittee held on the 11th of March. Are you happy to receive these? Yep, great. Thank you very much. So done. We'll move on to item number 8, the annual Q4 performance report for 2020-2021. And I'm going to ask Shane to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. This is our annual report for the final one for the previous year. There are detailed explanations for the position on each of the project indicators and also the performance indicators. In summary, we have quite perhaps a higher number of red ones than we would have liked, but a lot of those can be put down to the circumstances which prevailed last year in regard to the pandemic, in particular the personnel ones around sickness absence and the traineeships, which we weren't able to progress quite as quickly as we would have liked, and some of the more strategic ones around our digitised committee services, although of course actually we managed to digitise our committees very well during the course of that year, but we're now in a position to say where do we want to go forward with continuing with that. And the implementation of the peer review recommendations, we have yet to hear from the peer review team when they want to come back and revisit that. One other, just to mention, we've been tracking through the year the days to process housing benefit and council tax support claims. That's still an issue for us, and we're still working with Civica to look at ways in which we can automate as much as possible the council tax support process. But at the moment, we are still largely in abeyance in terms of our enforcement activities. So we are allowing for additional time for processing and not carrying out the same level of enforcement activity as we have until now because of the circumstances which have prevailed. So that is something that we will start to address again during the course of this year. As I say, there are detailed explanations against each of the indicators, but I'm happy to answer any questions if members have any.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Councillor Stephen first, and then Councillor Hodges.
My question is about the city centre transport strategy plan. Obviously, it's taken a bit of time. For a number of reasons, it's been postponed for quite some time. And I think that's probably something that we're all quite disappointed about. But anyway, but my question really is about as we start that bit of work, it's about what type of consultation we will have with residents, and particularly people across the city with certain different types of needs. Often, perhaps we might fall into a problem where we do a body of work and then we do a statutory consultation at the end of a process. And I'd be disappointed if that was the case in this, because it's such an important piece of work. And I'm just wondering whether, if I could just ask the officers whether what sort of consultation could potentially happen as a sort of pre-consultative work to try to make sure that the needs of people, younger people, older people, those with disabilities and so on, cycling groups, transport users and so on, could actually be consulted at the beginning of the process. So I was wondering what is in the current plan, and if there isn't those sorts of things, whether we could see that that could be fed into the start of the consultant work.
I'm going to ask David Blake to answer that one.
Thank you, Chair. We're in the process of evidence gathering at the moment, as it says in the report. I will just to say in answer to your question, make sure that during that evidence gathering process, stakeholder engagement does take place, whether that is face-to-face or by electronic means, so that members and the wider community can have an input into the consultation during the inception stages, rather than simply after the event when a draft report is published.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hodges.
Thank you. On page 24, continuous learning from complaints has a red status. And I've read it and I can't understand why it's red, what's been measured to make it red, what are we expecting from this which is not being done. With the other red ones, I can see why it's red, but I can't quite get my head around that one.
Jane, safely.
Thank you, Chair. The status relates to underlying milestones in a number of cases. So there's a particular project there which we'd intended to achieve, to get to a certain point at a certain stage, and we haven't achieved that. So in respect of the remedy guide, which is being produced, that should have been completed by the end of the financial year. So that should have been done by the end of Q4. But as it says there, it's still not quite completed yet. And the training is being rolled out as part of Q1 rather than in the previous quarter. So it's simply the fact that we've not yet achieved everything we should have done by the due date. So once those are completed, then that status should then turn back to green.
Thank you. Councillor Denham.
Thank you. My question was about the city centre transport strategy as well. And given that inevitable delays with COVID, a question as to what extent actually the sort of criteria or the piece of work needs to be amended or adapted. You know, in representing the city centre, you know, I've seen all the applications for pavement licenses for businesses wanting to operate on the pavement. And is, you know, do we need to look at kind of reimagining or looking again at the balance between pedestrianisation and vehicular transport within the city centre and the impact on the businesses, the hospitality sector, because at the moment it's a bit kind of pot luck, isn't it, whether you've got a wide enough piece of pavement outside of your hospitality business. So is that something that we perhaps need to give some thought to that might impact on this?
David Blake.
Thank you. Yes, it's a good point. And of course, with the pandemic, people are looking at use of space, whether it's public or private, in a different light nowadays. And certainly we've seen, you know, quite a growing number of organisations wishing to make use of outdoor space. I don't know the detail of the brief, but I will make sure that as part of the work, as an outcome from this evening, that we make sure that any consideration to use of shared space or public space, as well as highway, takes into consideration some of the lessons we've learned during the pandemic.
Thank you. The only thing I'd add personally on that one is we have always accepted that we are not the Highways Authority, but that's the County Council. And we're working with the County Council on this piece of work, but clearly we're working within their policy framework. So in terms of, you know, this is not a wide scale, not one that LTP foresees. So we've got to work within that policy environment. But as a County Councillor yourself now, you'll have the opportunity elsewhere to make those comments.
But we do have an interest in the businesses, the hospitality sector, and the
yeah, we undoubtedly have
centre.
an interest in, and the piece of work can reflect on what we've learned from COVID. But you know, I would hate the Worcester News or anybody else to get the idea that this council is advocating a wide-scale pedestrianisation, because that is not what it's not what we're going to be representing. But certainly learning from COVID, I'm sure.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. First relates to digitised services and what progress is going to be made. And I speak particularly because I'm one of the people who are on that programme to test the stuff. And we got it when it came out with modern.gov. The first time I tried it on an Apple product, it was found not to be work with Apple. Other products can be brought as well, I hasten to add. I'm wondering whether we're going to be moving away from that to a more generic system.
Mr. Flynn?
Through you, Chair. You need a more detailed answer than I can give at the moment, but certainly the purpose of the exercise and involving members in that process was to be able to understand these kind of issues. So to what extent are we able to roll out digital services and move towards paperless agendas and so on relatively smoothly, or are there, as a result of the fact that people will be using their own devices and different systems and so on, that there are problems that we've got to iron out? So as much of that information, which we're still in that gathering stage, we can take forward into the project. And obviously things have been somewhat different this year in terms, we've made a lot of progress in terms of the digital agenda, but how much of that we can sustain, partly we're constrained by government in terms of the legality around meetings and being present at meetings and so on. So there is still quite a lot of change to think our way through before we progress this.
If I can come back, please, Chair Shane. Accepting that point, my secondary question is, I'm wondering why we need a bespoke system to read documents when I'm sat now reading off of the internet the document we have. And I'm just questioning whether we might be trying to be too IT complex as opposed to let's get an 80% solution. Because I look around the room and I see lots of councillors who are still using paper, which, you know, for a very good reason, but after I would have thought 18 months of lockdown when we've all been using computers, we hopefully might have made that transition by ourselves. So I've noticed Sian's coming to the table because she knows I'm a thorn in her side.
I'm going to ask Sian Stroud, you've got an answer for this one, hopefully, or a suggestion. Do you need a little card?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Mitchell, you're correct in saying that the modern.gov app is not working with Apple, and that is seems to be a huge disadvantage in terms of the current sector and people's preferences. And our model at the council is that councillors can bring their own devices, and I'm sure that a number of councillors would want to continue to subscribe to that. So the software will need to support that. Modern.gov is a market leader and it is our agenda publishing tool, but what we wanted it to do, the thing that you were kindly trialling for us was giving you full access to papers, including exempt papers, in one place, because if you go via the website, you'll only get the public ones. And then, so one piece of functionality was giving you to everything, including exempt. And the other piece was then giving you the capacity to mark them up and annotate them digitally. But there are other ways we could achieve both of those things. And one is members having their own Worcester.gov UK addresses, email addresses, which we're committed to rolling out, and having access to Office 365 places where all your papers are stored equally, so that if you are digitally enabled and you want to come along, you can go in and look at your all your papers, including your exempt ones, and annotate them in Office 365 instead. So I take on board that if it's not going to work with everyone's devices, it's not going to work for us. And I think in the meantime, we've moved on in so far as thinking there are other ways we can achieve a software solution. But what it's set out to do is to give you that whole set of papers you could work on remotely.
Thank you, Sian. And Chair, my second question was reference traineeships. I think it's great that we're committed to offering up 20 traineeships. My question is, I'm very surprised that more haven't been taken, particularly in the current climate where jobs of a while ago were quite short in supply. And I'm wondering, is there more we can do in terms of marketing them at the local colleges and schools or not?
Mr. Flynn.
Through you, Chair. Certainly, there is always more we can do in terms of promoting that idea. The notes make the point that we're revising our targets around traineeships, and that's partly to do because we've been through a process of reviewing our structures, and that's going to give rise to certain new positions, which is already bearing fruit in terms of some apprentices and so on, which we've recruited. So it is definitely something which is very much a commitment to, not least from the point of view of bringing in new people and new ideas into the council, which is always welcome. So yes, we will be looking to publicise it as much as we can, certainly.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on this paper? If not, are we happy to note the contents of the annual and quarter four performance for 2020-2021? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. We'll move on then to quarter four financial monitoring report. Shane, are you doing this or is Mark? It says Mark down.
Thank you, Chair. I'll introduce it and Mark can join us, and if there are any detailed aspects that we want to discuss, then he can take us through those. In terms of the overall report, this is the second of our final year-end reports. And we are reporting a surplus of 932,000, which was a significant change from our expectations at quarter three. Appendix 1 sets out the main reasons for that, for the change from the quarter three, and members will see that it's primarily due to a number of government grants and grants from other sources which came through in the last quarter. So it was a significant change of a financial position purely as a result of that. Those will be all one-off items, so they won't affect the underlying position, but they will have an impact at the year end. The second recommendation is around the write-offs. We have a relatively low number of proposed write-offs because, as I said earlier, we are at a position where we are taking a prudent view in terms of our enforcement activity around council tax and business rates. So we expect those potentially to increase in time, but we are making sufficient provision for that, so that shouldn't cause us a financial problem. The third recommendation is around a transfer of the reserves, and just going back to the previous item, within the city plan there was a commitment to put £100,000 towards the transport strategy. At one stage, I think it was at last year's budget, we agreed to transfer that because it wasn't immediately needed to fund flood grants should they be required. In the event they weren't, so we're now proposing to transfer that back to the transport strategy, so that funding is available to deliver the work that we've commissioned. And then finally, the surplus that I mentioned now requires just an allocation to make sure that we put that into reserves, which of course is for members to agree. The table at paragraph 10.6 sets out a set of proposed reserves. A number of those, and I'll just talk through them, are the result of existing discussions which were taking place through the year, and or also some things which are slipped from this year and which need to be put through into next year. The first of those is the SWDP. We had a higher cost than expected, and in the event that came in lower than we'd anticipated, but we do need to carry forward some funding into next year to cover that. As members will be aware, we've had to do some reorganisation to meet the social distancing requirements, so we need to put a little bit of money aside to make sure we have sufficient kit for that. And then there were a number of grant areas where we've been in discussion with third parties about supporting and commitments which we've been undertaking during the course of the year. So we now need to make just a reserve to cover those. Item 10.5.7, the Ward Recovery Fund. Members agreed at the budget that we would have 1 year for a Ward Recovery Fund. This proposal is that we extend that for a second year to make sure that members have sufficient allowance to work through the whole of the recovery period. And the remaining ones are to do with further work that's required, new cost aspects which have come through very late, which we need to make provision for. That leaves a measure of 565,000, which at the moment is proposed to put in a broad allocation into a city delivery fund, and members have a supplementary report in front of them which sets out some more detailed allocations which are proposed in respect of those. So those are the proposals which are, and the recommendations of which are in front of members. Happy to take any questions in respect of those or any details of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. I've got Councillor Gregson.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I just wondered, Shane, what process you've been through in order to produce the agenda item 9A in terms of the proposed allocations of the delivery fund. I don't remember being asked for any proposals to fit into that. It may be that members have got other proposals, and yet the total amount has been sucked up by those 6 priorities which were identified by yourself. I just wondered what flexibility there was in that figure.
Sorry to interrupt, but we are dealing with council item number 9. I'm quite happy for that question to be put, Adrian, but I think it should be put at 9A when we get to that item. Okay, so this is item 9. Any other question? Any other comments? Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. Shane, I'd just like to say thank you to you and the staff within the financial team in particular through what has been a traumatic year from a financial perspective, where at one point we were predicting to be significantly overspent. And in the end, we managed to come out better off than we anticipated, partly through the significant level of funding we received from government, but not least as well from the careful financial management from this council. So I am pleasantly surprised to be sat here in May, June 2021, looking at the accounts from last year and not looking at a big black hole. So I think the residents of Worcester should understand that we're in a relatively financially stable position, and we can deliver on things that going forward into 2021-22, which we wouldn't have been able to do if we hadn't had over £5 million in government funding. That's outward of all the other stuff. And I think on the particular one there, and speak with some, having chatted to one or two of the individuals involved, is the ability to keep people off the streets. The £1 million for enable us to ensure that no one needed to be homeless during COVID, were homeless, is testament, and hopefully it's enabled us to get hold of those people and help them in the future moving on, so they're moved on to better conditions. And I know from other briefings we had, many of them have moved on to more stable accommodation. So every cloud, as I say, has a silver lining, and some people's lives have been slightly better off as a consequence. So thank you to you and your team.
I think that was a comment rather than a question. Yes.
Yeah,
That's
it
fine.
was a comment.
That's fine. We're allowed.
It was more of a comment.
Comments are allowed, but you don't need Mr. Flynn to answer. Councillor Hodges.
Thank you. It's a delayed interest, I have to declare. I did read it and then I'd forgotten. In 10.5.3, it refers to the WFA and 25,000 agreed for various installations and improvements at Claims Lane. I have to declare that because my husband is a director of the WFA.
Thank you, Councillor Hodges. If there's no other ones, I'll just make the very similar comments, I guess, to Councillor Mitchell, which is, I think we as a corporate body, as the council, should be very pleased and grateful to the government, the first thing, for £5.6 million of help this year. These were unprecedented times, and absolutely it was essential for government to help, but I don't think anybody would have thought we were going to get over £5.5 million this time last year. It has kept this council afloat. Without that £5.5 million, we would be in serious trouble. So I think the government has responded to the needs of Worcester and has properly funded local government during this pandemic. I think there can be no doubt about that, given the outturn. I think officers deserve special mention and thanks for hard work, but not just those who've counted the money and kept it in good order, but also those who've delivered the services in pretty phenomenal and exceptional circumstances. And so I'd just like to put on record my support and thanks to them for that. I have a question, though, around the 10 million or 9 point something and change that's a Section 31 grant for business rates this year. It is... you'll know it. I think it's the only 10 million we talk about. If we don't need all of that. If there's not a deficit of 9.9 million on the business rates pool, is it unring fenced? Do we keep it, or does it go back to the government if it isn't all required? And conversely, if it's more than 9.9, has the government said anything further? So this is 10.3, paragraph 10.3. The business rate risk reserve includes 9.91 million.
Thank you, Chair. That reserve is largely in relation to a timing issue with regard to the transfer of money between years, and it's government funding to help us meet the deficit which has arisen. So in the event that it is simply a transfer between years, so it won't be higher or less than that, it'll just be the 9.9 million, which will just be transferred between the 2 years. So that's all that part of the reserve is for.
Okay, so there's no potential to make or to keep any money, or for it to be bigger than that?
No, it's simply to meet the difference between this year. It's taken forward into next year. That's why we need to reserve it. That's
brilliant. Thank you very much. Any other questions on the report? Okay, the recommendations are that the committee reviews the financial monitoring details, including budget variances and performance indicators for the fourth quarter, that the committee reviews the proposed write-offs of council tax and business rates for the quarter and approves the amounts noted, that the committee approves the transfer of the reserves noted in paragraph 10.7, and that the committee considers officer recommendations on the allocations of the surplus as detailed in 10.5. So those are not the ones that are covered in the following paper, but those which are detailed in 10.2, I think. Is it 10.2? No, 10.6. Paragraph 10.6 in the table thereafter. Are those agreed? Yep, agreed. Thank you very much. Those are agreed. We move on then to our agenda item 9A, financial monitoring report, allocation of the remaining year-end surplus of 565,000. Mr. Flynn, do you want to say something on this?
Simply to say, thank you, Chair, that it is a provisional allocation of the remaining surplus. We simply titled it as the delivery fund. There was no particular discussion around that. It was just a catch-all title to record it. And the allocations there were done in discussion with the managing director and the leader of the council.
Any questions on this paper, 9.9A? Councillor Gregson.
I refer you to my earlier question.
I think Mr. Flint's just given you the answer, which
Well,
it was debated in consultation with myself and with the managing director.
So to what extent then is there any flexibility in that for the ability for other schemes or other councillors to have proposals which fall into that category? Because it does seem all the money is being used at once.
I think the money here is designed to, I mean, we've just had a set of elections, and elections have consequences. The items here go towards meeting the manifesto commitments of my party, who've just won a majority on the council. I'd hope that these items reflect many of the things that you heard on the doors as we did in the election. They are about including the cleansing of the city. It is a major concern for residents. And £250,000 is allocated there for cleansing, grounds maintenance, grass cutting, and another 75,000 for public waste, the return of the Saturday skips, and bins and collections. These things are things that this administration feel are important, and they are things that we want to deliver on. These are the things that, some of the things that we promised in our manifesto. There are details in these that are yet to be worked out. So how we spend the 110,000 for the Future High Street Fund, supporting those activities around filling vacant units, how we use the money to support parking initiatives to attract visitors to the city, and how we deal with things around enforcement of parking outside of the city centre, I think are all matters for policy committees clearly to debate. But the role of this P&R committee is to agree these allocations as is its traditional purpose after any surplus is agreed. So for this committee, it is to agree these, and this is what the administration are putting forward. Councillor Hodgson, I'm happy to take Councillor Gregson again in a moment, but you, Councillor Hodgson?
Pleased about 4 and also number 5 as well, because in Place and Economic Development last night, we actually discussed about possibility of subsidising car parking, perhaps in the evening and that sort of thing. And also, around the high street and empty shops and that sort of thing. So we certainly, under the PED, we're really delighted to see this.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got an array of hands. I will have Councillor Stanley and then Councillor Stafford, and then I saw Councillor Denham and Councillor Stephen and Councillor Alcott in that order. So let's do Councillor Stanley first.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I mean, if we look at these priorities as in their whole, sort of, they are clearly things that were mentioned, I'm sure, to each of those people who were standing for election this time and those who were campaigning on their behalf. Residents across the city made it absolutely clear that whilst no one's suggesting, you know, there are occasions when, you know, if we're saying we need to make improvements to the public realm, that sort of implies, it may be, that we're custodians of a city that isn't in particularly good shape. We can take what we've got and improve it. And I think these measures taken in their whole are a serious attempt to provide particularly the commercial outlets of Worcester with an infrastructure, if you like, that means that we will attract people into the city centre, that the opportunities for commercial activity can be enhanced. We've spoken about this on many occasions before. I think these measures should be commended, and I would certainly do that.
Thank you, Councillor Stanley. Councillor Stafford?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to speak in support of the proposal. Got a range of measures which meet a lot of the priorities of residents, but also a fair few of them will also help with the city's recovery from the COVID, in terms of the attracting more people into the city centre, and as the Councillor Bailey said, these are sort of allocations. There's a lot of detail that can be worked out that we can hopefully all work on together in our various committees. So I'd welcome the proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Stafford. Councillor Denham next.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, for many of us, we've only sort of seen this information this evening, and we voted at full council to continue with the committee system, and my understanding of the committee system is that it's cross-party and all members are able to participate. A number of things on the list I would recognise and I would support. So in terms of what flexibility is there within it, because there are significant other priorities that a number of members may be aware of. The one that particularly comes to mind actually is around facilities for youth activities for skateboarding. So this has been an ongoing issue and conversation for our community safety team, because some residents view skaters as antisocial behaviour. The skaters themselves have no facilities, and I don't know, Councillor Stafford, I'm looking at you as Chair of Environment. I understand there's a piece of work that has been done around provision of play facilities for different ages. I don't know whether that's been published or it's still a draft assessment, but I understand that draft assessment indicates, you know, a lack of facilities for the older age groups. Can we bid for some of this funding to be put towards that very real need that has been identified by, you know, a number of residents of different ages?
Thank you. Councillor Stephen next.
Okay, I think if you take each one of these items by itself, I don't think you could really argue with them. But my question really is that, is it prudent and is it sensible to decide now what we think are the priorities for the next 12 months? And I think there could be a situation where if we have a downturn, or there's more of a recession, or there's some further wave of coronavirus or something as we're coming into next winter, we might actually think, well, actually it would have been better to spend this money on a number of other projects. So I was thinking that maybe if we had this sort of 930 odd thousand that was this surplus, would it not have been more prudent perhaps to have kept a little bit of it back, maybe 200,000 or 250,000, say, for other projects which might come to light during the course of the next 12 months, rather than predetermining that now at this point? Thank you.
There is an answer to that one. I'll make sure you get it at the end of the questions, if that's all right. Councillor Alcott next.
Thank you, Chair. Just with regard to the 250,000 public realm maintenance money, just taking into account the declared biodiversity emergency and environmental policies in place, obviously grass cuttings referred to, I'm just looking for assurance we're not going to do lots of unnecessary grass cutting, spending time and money on that when the benefits of wilding, etc., are clearly being acknowledged.
Okay. I've got Councillor Riaz next, I think.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, it sounds rather like it's my party and I'll cry if I want to. I mean, maybe you weren't hearing about the messages on the streets about the failing provision for youth and play. Maybe you weren't hearing the messages about mental health issues and suicide amongst children and amongst young people and people that have been out of work. Maybe you weren't hearing about the messages about the poor air quality and how that's affecting people's lives. And maybe you weren't hearing about the messages that about litter and other things. I mean, you made a commitment at full council, Councillor Bayliss, in good faith of working with the rest of the council and making joint decisions, and it feels like that you've lost a real good opportunity here to have an input from all of this council. And I'm not saying these priorities aren't priorities that the council needs, but I think you've lost a really good opportunity to hear to back up your claims up full council where you wanted everybody to work together. And I think there's an opportunity that you still have, whether you still wish to put it out to us. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Mitchell and then Councillor Mackay.
Members who said that it's the first time they've seen this paper tonight. Papers have been out for a little while, and we are in committee, so there is an opportunity to debate it, and ultimately it will go to the vote. So the committee system hasn't changed. We're in exactly where we are. These are proposals. People could make recommendations, can make amendments, but it will go to a vote. So I'm struggling to understand why people are moaning about the process or making comment on the process. This is the process we've been following for the last 3 years. So anyway, I'm sure you'll follow up on that.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. What I would say in relation to, you were talking about elections and going out and listening to people on the doorstep. Well, what I would say is that in my particular area, each one of these 6 categories was mentioned. And it wasn't just mentioned by one person or 2 people, it was mentioned by a lot of people. And that includes even the improved and effective goal control programme, where they're causing more problems to people in the suburbs of the city. And in relation to things like subsidised parking to attract visitors, I mean, I was at a meeting quite recently with Councillor Riaz and Shane, where we were actually talking about this and trying to incentivise people coming back into the city. So we were looking at ways and means of attracting them by having more better maybe provisions or costings in relation to car parks within this city. So really what I would say about we are being prudent about what people actually want. And for that reason, I'm quite happy to support this.
Thank you very much. I'm not hearing any other, seeing any other requests to speak on this item. I guess I would comment, and I think Councillor Mitchell has given the general answer, which is, of course, this is the committee system. It doesn't mean that we won't continue to have arguments and debates, and that's right and proper in policy. The election, I would disagree with Councillor Riaz, I'm afraid. I think we were listening to the electorate as we were improved our number of seats in this council from 16 to 18, and you went from 15 to 11. I think we were the ones who were listening to the public, and I'd encourage you to do the same if you want to reverse your decline. These are the priorities of the people. These are things that are important to them. That's not to say there aren't other important issues, and should there be additional resources over the year. This is a council that spends in excess of 20 million. And the committees are the primary policy areas for that spend. So within your budget areas of responsibility, you'll be continuing to look at things and bring those forward. I'd certainly like to support further youth facilities if the money is available further in the year. That may be a capital request. I think it would normally come through the Communities Committee. And I'd encourage you as Vice Chairman of the Communities to bring that forward if that's your will, and for the committee to debate that. The role of this committee is to allocate this surplus. It's what we've done every year. We might have followed a slightly different process when we're in no overall control, where we might have had a meeting behind the scenes and worked out exactly how we're going to spend it. Clearly, elections do have consequences. And this is, I hope, I've not heard anybody argue against the items on this list. I think these are all things we recognise collectively are things that the people of Worcester want to see. They want cleaner streets. They want their bins emptied better. They want more action on goals, that action that we can take. They want us to fill the voids in the shopping frontages here. They want us to encourage visitors and retail and shoppers back into the city centre, and they want us to do something about nuisance parking outside the city centre and where planning enforcement isn't currently undertaken. These are the people's priorities. I'm happy to put them out there. They were in our manifesto. So on that basis, if I see no other comments, I think we will go to the vote. Councillor Denham, you just got in there.
Thank you. I mean, in light of the debate and the conversation, is it possible for us to propose a formal amendment with regard to the allocation of these funds to make within that an allocation towards a skate park or youth facilities?
And where would you be taking the money from?
From within this amount.
You'll need to
here.
identify which item you want to take the money from if you want to just because it will have a consequence on the budget.
Well, we haven't been involved in the conversation, so we don't know the detail behind it. I do know that officers are looking at locations and ways of the possibility of funding the facilities, a facility within our parks to meet the needs of part of the population. I don't know what that actual cost is likely to be, but you could take some out of each of out of number 1 and number 4, which are very substantial sums of money.
So how much would you be, if we're going to go on an amendment, you'll have to make an amount, how much, and how much you'll take out of each one of the other ones to make a formal amendment, and then I'll see if it's seconded, and then we'll have a debate on the amendment.
I'm looking at officers. Has any costing been done around youth facilities that can inform this?
I mean, Chair, we know that costing has been done by officers, so it would be more helpful to use that information from officers, so we're getting something which is worthwhile. But you know, if
I'm looking for,
I'm just going to put a finger in the wind, then it doesn't seem.
But that's what you're asking us to do, and that's what this committee is allocating this money this evening. So you're putting forward an amendment.
Well, I'm seeking advice from officers. Are we looking at 50k, 100k? What would be appropriate?
Mr.
Through you,
Flynn, do you have a
Chair,
view?
I don't have any figures to hand in terms of what their estimates are for that provision. And I don't think if we were to recess and try and find them, that I would be able to find them.
Okay,
So we
fine.
could do, I could do a written response to that subsequently if you wish.
Could I suggest that a different way of doing that might be for you to take that to the communities, or one of your colleagues to take it to the communities committee and for them to ask how much and do some research on this, and then bring forward a proposal to the committee. The committee itself has a delegation limit, I think it's 100,000, so it can reallocate within its budgets if that is, I guess this is a capital item as well, is what you're talking about, rather than revenue, which these items are.
I mean,
Councillor,
the Communities Committee has limited funds. This is a substantial amount of money that you're asking us to sign off tonight, which, if there is no flexibility, if there's no movement within it, means it's extremely difficult to progress that capital expenditure, which is an identified need within the city by residents and by officers. If officers are not able to provide me with a figure, I propose that, pending further information, that 50k from item number 1 is put aside for that purpose.
okay, so that's an amendment that you're proposing, that is reduced from 250 to 200 to fund a skate park. Yeah. Okay. And do I have a seconder for that? That's a great. Oh yeah. Okay. Fine. Well, we'll debate this as an amendment. Let me say first of all, this is not. I'm afraid on the hoof tonight. £50,000 on this is not something that I think I can agree to, particularly taking out of the cleaner, greener budget, which is where the majority of Worcester people want us to do. This is a key priority for this administration. I'm afraid I wouldn't be voting for this. Councillor Stanley, as Communities Committee Chair, do you have a view?
Thanks, Chair. I mean, obviously, if the amendment wants to go forward to the vote, then so be it. But I would urge members to look at, you know, we can't really pare these things down successfully or effectively this evening. They're allocated funds for really priority targets. However, what Councillor Denham is describing is something that could go, and I think should go, back to the Communities Committee for discussion. I'm sure Councillor Riaz and myself will have a briefing beforehand, and that could be part of that agenda. And then we could seek, assuming it goes forward at that committee, the relevant funds from the capital fund. As you describe, I think that's by far the most effective way forward.
Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you. Again, there is a committee process system which can be used to bring this through the communities. My concern at this point is that there's not just a capital expenditure when you're building a skate park, of which I don't think you get much of a skate park for £50,000. I think most skaters would be a bit disappointed. There's an ongoing sustainment cost for that in terms of maintenance, etc. So we're just not in a position to make that decision tonight. We'd be guessing. And I don't think that's what we're here to do, have a guess, because we haven't got what we want.
Okay, Councillor Hodges on the amendment.
Yeah, on the amendment, I would say that you've used the expression on the hoof. Now, we're presented with this paper, and we're presented with a sum of £250,000 on that first priority. There's no breakdown as to how that £250,000 is going to be spent. If we had more information there, or we'd been involved previously in this process, we might have been able to suggest areas where some of that 250,000 we would think would be better spent on a skate park. It's no good being scathing about the 50,000 and saying you're not going to get much of a skate park for that, because we are trying to do this on the hoof, because we've not been given the opportunity to be involved in it earlier on. And we've been presented with these figures, no background as to how these sums of money have been arrived at. And, you know, over this side, we're saying that we feel that there are priorities, that people on the doorstep have told us about priorities too, that haven't been included here. And I think the whole process of this being done has actually excluded anyone other than your particular party and your particular opinions. Now, you may say, as a result of the election, you're entitled to do that. But let's be honest then, okay, if that's the attitude you're taking, don't pretend that you're trying to be inclusive and include us in the decision making.
Any other comments on the amendment? Councillor Stanley, Stafford even. Too many S's.
Thank you. Yeah, my concerns with the amendment is that these are all revenue. These are all in-year revenue surpluses and the amendment is for a capital item, and there may well be capital budgets available that could potentially fund that. There is a draft paper on strategic play areas, of which a skateboard park is only an aspect of, and that paper might no longer be suitable for the Environment Committee, although the original sort of question arose via the Environment Committee. Is probably discussions with Lloyd. It might be that the paper needs to move to a more appropriate committee than the Environment Committee. But certainly, I don't support the amendment, and we still may be able to meet the wider play areas through a sort of more considered process. Thank you.
That's not your time up, but thank you anyway. Okay. I'm not seeing any other comments on the amendment. I suggest we go to the vote on the amendment, which is to reduce the amount spent on cleaning, grounds maintenance and grass cutting by 50,000 and make a 50,000 allocation towards a skate park. All those in favour of that, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4. 6. All those against?
7.
Okay, that amendment falls. We go back to the proposals as put. If before we put this to, I'm seeing no other hands on this, but before we vote on this, I would make the point again about the committee is that once these allocations are made, the monies go to the committees who are concerned. So communities, environment, I think maybe PED, there'll be a paper on each one of these that comes forward to the committee explaining how the 250,000 or the 75 or whatever will be spent, and there'll be an opportunity at those committees for members to debate and to consider those at that point. So the committees themselves will very much be in charge of the policy, but it's P&R's job to allocate the cash at this point. We've done it the last 3 or 4 years when we've had surpluses. We're doing nothing different this evening. So, okay, with that, I'm not seeing any other comments. We will go to a vote on allocating this 565, that the committee agrees to allocate the remaining year and surplus for the purposes identified in the report. Okay, all those in favour?
9.
All those against?
0.
Abstentions? 4. Okay, that is carried. Thank you very much. And I hope we were able to disagree agreeably in that process. Item number 10, the corporate risk management report. Mr. Flynn, are you presenting that?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is the third and final of year-end reports. There are, just to draw your attention to 3 risks which are showing red on the report. The first is local government funding, which is has been with us for a while. This is because the government has yet to bring forward its proposals around fair funding and the business rates review, which have been pending for some while. We're expecting to receive those this year. So we'll then know where we are in terms of longer term finances. There's the second around COVID-19 isn't really a COVID-19 issue. It's just become evident during this period because we've become so much more reliant on ICT. Therefore, we've upped our risk profile in terms of security. And we have agreed some new actions to make sure that we have full backups, which cannot be changed. And once those are in place, We'll then review that and will remain red until we've completed that. And the third was around delivering legally compliant elections. In the current situation, that was red as at 31st of March, when of course we managed to deliver legally compliant elections. So it is no longer a risk for us. If there are any questions on the detailed items relating to each of those, I'm happy to take them. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hodgson.
About the SWDP, but whether or not somebody can have a few comments about it.
What sort of comment can you help us a little bit out?
771, and it's the delays.
And you'd like to, what's the question, Lucy? Sorry.
Well, it's just the delays, whether or not it's going to come in the required time after a delay of about a year.
Okay. Mr. Blake?
I'm afraid we don't have that information available at this meeting. We can provide a written update to members in terms of progress on SWDP and consequences of any delays.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions on this report? Councillor Denham.
Thank you. There's I've got a couple of questions. The first of the risk assessments is around city plan priorities and resources, which is marked in green, which kind of depending how you define resources. I wonder whether actually there is a risk around our officer staffing and the skills that we have available. With the voluntary redundancy programme, there's a number of senior people that's left, and there's an indication that some other vacancies maybe some difficulty in filling, given the scale, the huge scale of the programme in the city. What is the risk? Do we have sufficient skills and staffing to meet with that? No, I've got. You would want to answer that one? Or
yes, please, okay. And we'll come back to you. David Blake.
Thank you. Yes, I think it's true to say that we are in a unique position at the moment in terms of the year we've just been through, plus our success, for want of a better word, in securing the additional funding. And I don't think anybody would expect me to say anything other than it's been incredibly stretching for us. In terms of the VR programme to which you referred, a number of staff over and above those that were granted VR put their names forward, and in some cases we were unable to grant that opportunity because we felt that those jobs could not be made redundant. You know, those were essential roles. So the process was managed very, very carefully with an eye to the future as well. I'm planning to bring forward a report to Personnel and General Purposes at the end of this month, setting out recommendations for members in terms of the additional resources that I think we require over the next few years in order to meet the challenges that the capital programme in particular is bringing. But these are challenging times, both in terms of managing the budget, managing the resources, and delivering a very, very challenging programme over the next 5 years that we are lucky enough to be able to have to deliver. And that's not, you know, that's without thinking about the Levelling Up Fund bid, which we will be embarking upon soon for another £20 million. So these are extraordinary times, and they are extraordinarily challenging for us. But I think, you know, the officers as well as the members are incredibly ambitious for the city. And we are working incredibly hard to do our best to secure as much money as possible. I hope that goes some way to allaying your concerns. Yes, it's tough. We will be recruiting a number of new staff, hopefully over the summer and towards the autumn, to bring in additional resources. Thank you.
Lynn, you had another question, I think.
I did, yes, thank you. So on the back of this report, we've got the just the sort of highlights or the summary of the risk registers from other areas. I have to say, as the former vice chair for community services, I'm not sure that I'd seen this recently. Well, I think it's and I'm conscious that this committee does have the overview of all the other committees. So the other three reds, so high risks within the City Council, sit within community services. Is it possible to, so what are those risks?
The red ones, are you particularly interested in?
Yeah, so
community
the
services?
three, so on page 93, the traffic light systems, so you've got a summary of each of the other risk registers within the City Council. Community services has the only three red risks within that matrix, and I don't think I know what they are, and I feel that this committee should have an awareness of what they are.
If we don't have it tonight, we can provide you with an answer. But Shane, do you know the answer to that?
Yeah, through you, Chair. That's exactly right. Because there are a significant number of risk registers at service level and a huge details of risk, we only provide a summary to the committee on the grounds that if there are any items that members want to pick up and get more information on, then we can provide those. So we can provide a written response to that, and we will bring more detail at the next committee to focus on those particular risks. If you're happy to do that. Yeah.
Yes, I think it perhaps would be good practice that where there are red risks, that those are brought to this committee as part of its overall oversight, perhaps.
Right, thank you for that. I'll take that on board. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions on that? Jabba, Councillor Riaz.
Thank you, Chair. Just on a previous point that Councillor Denham mentioned on a number of occasions in the Policy and Resources Committee, whilst the Council Board was being developed and the fund bid was being developed, I made the point that we need to have the key people in the City Council in positions who are able to deliver that. Hopefully, we are in the process of getting those people on board. Otherwise, we do risk a large proportion of our early money being spent on consultants' fees and expertise, which we would have otherwise have had within this City Council. So we'll be interested to know what positions we are going to be recruiting for, and how many of those positions, and which of those positions are at a senior level that can oversee the development and the delivery of the large tranches of money that we've received from central government.
Do you wish to answer that, David?
I think just to confirm, yes, once we present a report to P&GP, or I present a report rather, we will then, I'll seek a recommendation or make recommendations to members, and hopefully members will agree those recommendations, and then we can move forward and make the recruitment in those senior positions.
Anything else on this report? Okay, no, if not, can I move then that the committee notes the corporate risk management report? Do you agree? Are we agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Okay, we move on to the next item, Future High Streets Fund funding agreement. I'm going to hand over the chair at this point to one of the vice chairs, Councillor Stephen. Are you happy to stay there, or do you want to come in? And I will leave for this item and let me know when to come back.
Do I need to sit over there or not? I'll stay here. It's easier. Okay. Right. So in terms of presenting the paper, Shane Flynn.
Thank you, Chair. This is the next stage in our future high street development, and just reflecting on the comments on the last one, this is an area where we have appointed an external person to take this forward and has done some significant work for us. And what we've reached a point where, if we cast your minds back to the original decision to accept the fund, we agreed at that policy and resources committee at that stage that we would come back to the committee at the point when we receive assurance from government about how much we're going to receive and what the conditions are around that. The conditions of that are set out in a memorandum of understanding, which I was presented at Appendix 1. I'm not proposing to go through the details of that, but what the department has said to us verbally, and is supported by this process, is that they're not looking to make this a very tight legal process. They are using our Section 31 process, which is very generalized way of funding the council for these schemes. So we have a requirement to sign off that memorandum of understanding so that we can begin to draw down the funds, and they've already started to fund some of that, so we need to secure that. It does provide the opportunity for renegotiation. So in the event that we change the tack in respect of any of the projects, then there is opportunity to renegotiate that. So there should be a very limited risk of the department seeking to claw back any of the funding which it delivers. And this is done on an annual negotiated basis and is delivered up front. So it's important that we keep to the schedule within the memorandum of understanding in terms of cost, so we can deliver the whole of the project. And the second, the first recommendation, the second that I'm going to talk about is just in respect of the vision which we've set out at paragraph 2.4 and 2.5, where we've given some thought to what we want to, and what our overall vision is for delivering the Future High Streets Fund activity, and set out some detailed objectives in respect of that. So we're just looking to see if members are happy to accept that as the set of activities and agree the memorandum of understanding, so we can then agree with the department that the funding comes through as scheduled in the plans. So it's basically just for the committee to approve that, so we can move on to the next stage of the project. If there are any detailed questions, and we might need colleagues to answer any of the legal points that are in.
Thank you. Any questions or queries on that? Councillor Lynn.
Thank you. Thank you. I've got a question around Trinity House, because it's not all that long ago. It was a building in public ownership, in the ownership of the county council, I think. It's now currently in private ownership, and we are hoping to acquire it. I just wonder what kind of reassurance we can give to taxpayers or local residents around sort of, value for money and use of public funds.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. We will follow the standard process. We'll take a proper valuation of market value of the property, and then we will negotiate with the owners on the basis of that. So we will make a formal offer based on what is regarded as a proper formal evaluation of the market value of that property. And so we'll follow our standard processes and come back to members with those proposals when we've got more detail on them. So members will have an opportunity to approve that, along with all the other acquisitions which we're undertaking as part of this programme.
Thank you. Any other questions, queries on that? No? Okay. So this is for the committee to note and also to authorise it. We'll move to a vote on that. So the note is to note the progress of the development of the Future High Streets Fund programme and the objectives set out 2.5, and also to authorise the Deputy Director of Governance to undertake this memorandum of understanding.
And I'm the Vice Chairman of this committee. also need to perhaps be noted as well.
In the first part or the authorisation? To keep a little bit of a link in there for elected councillors. Sounds like a good idea to me. I'm looking to Sean. Does that make sense to you, Sean?
Sorry about the musical chairs members, due to social distancing. Sorry, yes, I couldn't quite hear the first part. Were you saying delegated authority and consultation to enter into the MOU? Obviously, we're at your disposal, members. The only thing I would say is it's a template document that we can't negotiate. So what is presented there is what we have to execute. You know, so I take your point, because often there is a negotiation and points that we would want a steer on, but it's a fait accompli this. So after tonight, we will execute it. So
okay, thank you.
all right.
Right, so on that basis, are we in agreement with these two items, noting and authorising? All those in favour? It's unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. So call back, Mark. Oh, sorry, I didn't understand. One abstention.
We move on to agenda item number 12, Future High Streets Programme, acquisition of the Scala Theatre and Public Realm Works. David, you must be taking this tonight, I assume.
I'm happy.
Ah.
Colleague up over here.
Oh, right.
My colleague right down there.
Kevin. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just happy to introduce the report and then invite colleagues to answer any questions that members may have. The report is a case in point. We've reached a point of acquisition of a further property as part of the Future High Street Fund. There are details set out in a subsequent report, which members will have had the chance to refer to, so we can consider whether or not we want to progress on the basis of that, or go into more details in that report if members wish. But we've reached a point where we have an outline proposal for that. Previously at the committee, we've agreed that we would go through a compulsory purchase order route if necessary. The costs in which we've identified, or the price that we've identified, are in line with the cost which would likely to be incurred through going through that route. So this does pass the value for money test in that respect. And the price is within the overall cost, including contingencies for the project, for that particular part of the project. As noted in the financial implications, we may therefore have to revisit the contingencies as we go through the remaining stages of the project, but we'll bring that to committee if need be later on. And then the second is around the public realm works, where we've been negotiating with the county council in respect of the work that's got to be carried on there. And we want to progress a funding agreement. So we're looking with the committee just to ensure that we have progress to do that, and to authorise expenditure of £170,000 to progress some of the survey and design work for those public realm schemes. So those are the things which we're asking for at the moment in terms of this overall piece of work, just to move us to the next stage on some of these elements. And if colleagues will be happy to answer any of the detailed questions members may have.
Thank you. Mr. Moore, do you want to say anything in introduction or not?
With it, the details of the actual deal are in the section in the confidential section, but the council's approached this on the basis as if it were a compulsory purchase. So we're paying for the purchase of the building, and we're also compensating the owner for their reasonable relocation and fit out costs on the alternative property that they have agreed a deal on to move into, and the details of that property are set out in the confidential section as well.
Thank you. Okay, questions on the paper then? Any? I'm not seeing any, but can I, from the chair then, can I just say, I mean, this is really exciting, I think, in the sense of it moving this project, this important project forward. The acquisition of the Scala really makes it possible to see that real regeneration of that part of the city, and together with the public realm works, together those offer a fantastic opportunity to really improve an area of the city centre which is far from the best at the moment. And I think, you know, these moves tonight might be incremental elements of that, but they are important works to do. As this item does refer to engagement with the county council, I should, I suppose, declare an interest, though not prejudicial, as a member of the county council and the cabinet member for economy. So if that could be recorded as well, that would be great. But I think this is an important step forward, and I'm not seeing anybody else want to comment on this. Okay, Councillor Hodgson.
Angel Street, this is such a real pleasure that we've been really well received, and all the properties now that are in our hands, and it's a really good day. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay then, if there are no other comments, I move to the recommendations that the P&R committee approve the acquisition of the Scala on the terms set out in the private report, authorise the managing director and the deputy director of governance to progress a funding agreement with Worcestershire County Council in respect to the public realm works, and authorise the expenditure of 170,000 of future High Street Fund grant towards advancing survey and design work for public realm schemes. I move that from the chair. All those in favour?
Yes, that's carried, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay. I think it was unanimous, so we won't bother with the against or abstentions. Item 13, replacement of wetside floor tiles at Purdiswell. Sean Stroud is going to introduce that. Right, okay, yes. Mr. Flynn's going to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. Just to introduce it and then again invite colleagues to make contributions if required. This has been something which has been quite a lengthy process of understanding the issues in respect of the tiles at Purdiswell Leisure Centre, which have given rise to a number of concerns in terms of the surface not being suitable or not being adequate. We have not reached a point at this stage where we think there's a significant risk, but it is one which has continued to raise concerns, and one therefore we think we've reached a point where we need to take action before we do reach a point of significant risk. Therefore, the proposal is that we undertake some contractors to replace the tiles with ones which have been recommended to us by Freedom Leisure, who use these facilities elsewhere. Obviously, there is an implication for that. It would be a capital impact, because the tiles, although they are a replacement, are also an enhancement of the existing facility, because they will create an extra value to the asset, so they are capitalizable. So we need to make a recommendation to council to spend an estimated £182,000 to carry out those changes. And as the report makes clear, there'll also be an impact at some stage, because we'll need to close the pool in respect of the income to Freedom Leisure, and they've estimated that it's potentially £120,000 in terms of lost income. So that will be the maximum, or should be the maximum, that's lost. Of course, pending any risks around the delays to the work that could change. But that income loss will fall to our income contingency reserve, which is there for that purpose. So we have sufficient funding in that, or over £400,000 within that reserve at the moment, so we can meet those costs if need be. There is an ongoing revenue implication, but it's very important that this work is carried out and completed. My recommendation is that we proceed with the works if the committee approves that. If there are any further questions or aspects of this that we wish to discuss, then again, we will answer any questions that members may have.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, Councillor Stephen first, then Councillor Stanley.
I've got a question about the opportunities for learning lessons from a problem. And I don't mean this to make a point, it's a political point, because I think it's mistakes happen. And I really just want to ask the question of how can it be that we as a council bought a swimming pool which has a defect? It seems like we're picking up the liability for it, and surely the original supplier or their indemnity or whatever should pick this up. And it could well be that they did install the tiles to the relevant standards at the time. I don't know, but it's just a question, is there anything that we can learn from this for future procurement projects?
Through you, Chair, I think the Council's monitoring officers spent some time looking into some of the issues, so invite Sean to speak on that one.
Thank you, Chair. And obviously it's worth noting that the exempt appendix deals with two issues. One relates to legal advice on our prospects for recovering our costs. And the second is a commercially sensitive issue in that it relates to another pool operator and their experiences. And if the committee felt it was helpful to discuss those in private session, then we could withdraw into session and look at those points. To answer here in the generality of what lessons can we learn, well, obviously we do want to learn lessons, and we've had this discussion on Sansom Walk as well previously about learning lessons where we can. But what we would say about the process to date is that we procured tiles that met the industry standards and the health and safety executives recognised standard. And there is one definitive standard for tile slipperiness called the pendulum slip test. And the benchmark figure it's given in the report for a level of slipperiness which is deemed acceptable, I'll come back to that, is the magic number of 36 watts, but you know, it's 36. But that doesn't mean that a tile below that level is an unlawful tile. It's all measured in terms of likelihood of a slip, and above 36 and above, it's assessed as a 1 in a million chance, and therefore it's given a moderate risk. And when those tiles were installed, the measurements that were taken successfully passed the pendulum slip test at that level. And what you'll see from the figures given in the report is that we have had a variable experience with these tiles about their performance against the pendulum slip test. So in good faith, both the council and its appointed contractors procured a tile that met the standards, but the council's experience and customers' experience has not been that that's been a satisfactory standard. So we're left with feeling that relying on this standard alone isn't sufficient. And if we were to learn a lesson from, well, learning a lesson from this would be about understanding what's worked well elsewhere. So not just reliance on the industry standard, but other users' experiences. And we have a good relationship with Freedom Leisure, and we've very much worked in partnership with them on this issue since 2017. And they've been open to eliminating the possibility that it's cleaning methods, and we are satisfied that it's not cleaning methods, it is a tile issue. And that's a matter that we now intend to take up with your support in terms of our rights and remedies. But it's taken us a while to work through that and eliminate that as an option, because that's in the face of pendulum slip tests sometimes giving very satisfactory results and not giving satisfactory results. So I would come back to the point that in terms of learning the lessons, we would want to look at what works well elsewhere, as well as, you know, what's on the box effectively.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions on Councillor Hodges, and then?
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Stanley. Yeah, okay. Councillor Hodges first.
There will obviously be an explanation as to why the replacement of these tiles hasn't taken place during one of our periods of lockdown. I would imagine it's going to be to do with COVID regulations, but it does seem to the residents of Worcester, because several have said to me, the swimming pool has been closed for periods of time, and now once we're allowed to start using it again, it's going to be closed to replace the tiles. Can you assure me that the replacement of these tiles couldn't be done during one of the lockdowns? because that would have seemed the obvious thing to do.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Hodges, I understand the point you're making, and it's obviously been something that we have discussed as well in bringing this report forward. There are two answers to that. There are the two reasons. One is that the COVID restrictions would have made it difficult for us to plan for this work during a period where we were unsure how much working could take place, whether we'd be able to procure contractors and so forth. But also, as the report notes, it was in the window between the first and second lockdown that the views really hardened around the view that we'd got to an unacceptable position. So it hasn't been an immediate decision, because the issues have been ongoing and occasionally improved and then slipping back again. In this period over last summer, we asked Freedom to start recording near misses as well. Obviously, they'd always recorded near misses that meet the health and safety definition of near misses, but to record more anecdotal feedback for us as well, and get that more of that customer perspective. And it was that period of time that really crystallized in our minds that from a user's perspective, it had become unacceptable. So it wasn't something that we'd necessarily gathered all the evidence for during the first lockdown, for example. It's been a more recent decision.
Okay, Councillor Stanley.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I guess my question is in a sense a supplementary to Councillor Hodges' question. You mentioned it when you were discussing the report, Shane, that there will be a loss of income whilst the remedial work takes place. And forgive me if the answer is contained within the report and I've missed it, but is there, clearly as Councillor Hodges has pointed out, the facility has been closed quite some considerable time over the course of last year. Do we have a sense, however vague or whatever, that might, the period of time that might be needed to actually undertake this work?
Sean Stroud's got an answer, hopefully.
Thank you, Chair. The period of work planned will obviously be confirmed by the appointed contractor following the procurement, but our assessment based on advice from our professional services teams is set out in section 3. We're looking at around a 12-week period of works, but it's only where the poolside tiles are being replaced that complete closure is required. And we're anticipating that that can be confined to a 2 to 3 week period. So the changing rooms, the work on the poolside tiles there would happen first, and that would happen over a longer period of time. Changing rooms would be re-provided elsewhere, and then it's the poolside aspect that would require the closure of the pool, and that's a short time piece.
Okay, Councillor Riaz.
Thank you, Chairman. How many serious injuries have taken place since 2017? Have any staff been injured, and have any claims been made against the council regarding those injuries?
Thank you. There is some information shared in the exempt appendix without getting close to personal data. What I would confirm is that in the entire period, there's only been one incident which required reporting because it met the RIDDOR standard of health and safety reporting. So only one injury that met that standard. The level of complaints has been and related issues has been assessed by Freedom and the council as frankly more than is desirable, but not more than possibly would be anomalous. Perhaps it's taken a while for the picture to build to the extent that it has. We've not been receiving reports of concerns on a significant scale, and we've only had one serious injury reported. And in relation to that, I would add that the council has not had to admit liability on any claim that relates to. So, so I'm just conscious that, I don't want to be misquoted, and it's important that we respect people's personal data in this. I don't think it's helpful that that gets played out. But this is where the report says we don't have a major safety concern. If we did, we would have brought that to you before, members. We have an ongoing issue that our customers do not think is tolerable, and we no longer think is tolerable, as opposed to a red on the health and safety risk register.
Okay, no other questions? If not, can we go to the recommendations then? 1, 1, 1, 2, and 1, 3. I won't read them out, but yes.
The question relates to obviously the money that we're spending. Are we sure now that the replacement tiles are going to be the gold standard of tiles that are going to meet sort of and exceed all the health and safety recommendations?
As previously advised, we're going to be procuring tiles that are tried and tested elsewhere, as well as ones that meet industry standard. The tiles that we bought met all industry standards, but we are not satisfied. So we will be buying tiles that are also tried and tested elsewhere.
You happy with that? Okay, if we can go to the vote on this item, then we've got 1, 1, 1, 2, and 1, 3. That we authorise the Corporate Director for Homes and Communities and Corporate Director for Finance and Resources to procure contractors, that we recommend to Council an amendment to the capital programme of 182,100 to meet the costs, and note the potential loss of income to Freedom Leisure and the Council during the works closure period, and that will be funded from the Income Contingency Fund. Are you okay? All those in favour of that? Thank you. Yes, that's carried. Okay, we will. That is agreed. We move on to, I think, the final item in the public section, which is the appointment to outside bodies. You have in front of you, courtesy of Mr. Pugh, a list of the representation as proposed. This has, I can assure the committee, there has been an amount of horse trading and agreement and give and take on all sides, generally on the vast majority of these appointments, with members from all parties being appointed, roughly in proportion to their strength on the council. We do, however, have a couple of contested posts, so I'm going to require Mr. Pugh to point those out to us so that we can vote on those to see if we need to determine the outcome of those, I guess. So the first one is?
Yeah, Chair, thank you. The two items where we do require a vote are shaded items. It's the SWDP Joint Advisory Panel, where we are restricted to 5 places, but we have 6 nominations.
So I've already indicated.
I'll deal with that. Yeah. Well, let's do them one at a time then. Okay, so the first one is the South Worcestershire Development Plan Joint Advisory Panel. It has 5 members, and there were 6 nominees for it. I've had a late withdrawal from the races. Councillor Barnes, I understand, is willing to not be nominated for this, and so the 5 names there would be Councillor Agar, Councillor Alcott, Councillor Hassan, Councillor Hodgson, Mrs. that is, and Councillor Stephen. So that one no longer needs agreement. So we move on to the next one where there was some contention, which is Lucy. You're just back in time for any votes, right? I think we've got bottom of page 4, Worcester Citizens Advice and Welfare. Yeah, Worcester WABAC essentially, isn't it? And we have 2 nominations. Is it 2? Just 2? 3? One on one page. Councillor Cleary, Councillor Denham, Councillor Lewing, or is it Lewin? Is it Lewing? Is it with a G? Yeah, it is correct there. Okay, fine. So three nominees for 1 post. Okay, I propose that we just do this by a ballot. Okay, we'll take them as they are on the paper. Those in favour, of Councillor Cleary? Okay, those in favour of councillor Denham? Aye. Councillor Lewing? One. Councillor Cleary it is then. Okay, right. The next one, is there any others? That's it. The others, we were able to find a couple of accommodations with 2 people, weren't we? I believe.
Chair, yes, just briefly, there are 1 or 2 positions where we have more nominations, but the organisations, I think, have got some more flexibility, and we are able to appoint in those circumstances with the names that we've received.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Riaz, I think you have a question.
Yes, Chair, just a question on St Martin's United Charities. I was always under the impression it was ward councillors that got a position on that charity. Ward or parish councillors, or within the parish of the church.
St Martin's. Page 3. I don't believe it's a requirement. No, not a requirement. No. Okay. Okay, so we will agree as is. Okay, Councillor Hodges. Yeah, sorry.
I'd like to make a general comment. We see these lists and they change from year to year, and I don't think any of us can get away from the fact that there is an element of political positioning here when we appoint these places. With a lot of these organisations, they might meet 3 or 4 times a year, and so it takes almost a whole year to actually get to grips with the issues that are really concerned in these various bodies. And then we find that because of a political decision, that's a capital P, we're taken off a certain organisation and replaced by someone else, just when we're getting used to the organisation and getting to grips with the issues. And I'd like to comment that I don't think that's always the best way of making appointments. As you said this evening, you are in the majority, so your party has the right to put whoever they want, wherever you wish. But I do think that there are some cases where it's not wise to change an appointment unless there's a particular reason or unless that person wants to come off that organisation. And I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you, Councillor Hodges. In many ways, I would agree with you, and there are more than a few examples on here of organisations where, I mean, in terms of I said that there's broad representation. Actually, the Labour group have more on here than their representation on the council at this current time. So, in terms of the numbers across the piece, they still very much reflect a 2-party state, as it were, and that clearly isn't. At the current numbers, that isn't the representation. So, but I take the wider point, which is about expertise and knowledge of individual members on here, and I think there may be something we want to look at in terms of terms, maybe a period of time in some organisations. Some of these are quite light on commitment, occasional, once or twice a year. Some of these require a sort of more in-depth. They're bigger organisations, they're more complex, they would take more time to get used to. And I think there may be a rationale for why we might want to appoint somebody for a period of 2-3 years, whatever it might be, in order to deliver that continuity. I think in terms of, I can think of a couple of significant organisations here. I think the councils, given the council's commitment in terms of financial to some of these organisations, we may want more than one member of these on these boards in the future, and it may be that in doing so, we may be able to address the balance issue as well. So it's difficult when you've got one position to provide balance across the council groups, but I can assure you, I will seek to find ways of assuring that going forward. But I think today we have got 3 or 4 examples here where we've increased the membership to give a representation across the council, and I think that's there's a genuine attempt to that. And the fact that we've only needed one ballot tonight shows a level of maturity amongst the groups in terms of sharing them out. So, but thank you very much. Okay, with those comments and that agreement on and vote, the result of the vote on the one that was contested, are we happy to approve this list? Yes, is that agreed? Raise your hands. Yeah. Yes. I would also say that in the old days, this was one of those things that was done by the leader's stroke of a pen, and I think it's a much better plan that we do this via at least an open debate in committee. So we move on to item 15. Any other business? I haven't been notified of anything that people wish to raise of sufficient urgency, so I don't believe there is anything there. Would somebody mind proposing the motion under section 100A?